Good day, students. In this video, I want to go over how good Kafka and Black Swan still are in the current scope of the meta, what changed for them since Black Swan's release in terms of teams and builds, and to answer the question if they are still worth going for. This discussion came forth mainly due to their rerun banners being available right now, and also because we are getting close to the next world and the potential rise of a new meta and new units which could either push them into obscurity or raise them back into the light. If you like this type of content and want to see more of it, remember to press the like button, sub to the channel, and leave a comment, as this will really help me spread the knowledge further into the known galaxy. But without further ado, let's get right into it, and let us start with what has changed for both of them in terms of teams. As both of them are part of the DoT archetype, the first major addition was the release of Huo in 1.5, which provided an amazing sustain option for the DoT teams, as she was able to provide them with an amazing attack buff and energy refund. Both of these are appreciated by both Kafka and Black Swan, as both units scale their DoT damage mainly through the attack stat, and the ultimate ability plays a significant role in their damage output as well, so the energy refund provided by Huo was well served. The second addition to the DoT archetype that ended up serving both of them greatly was the release of Ruin Mei in 1.6, an amazing support for the DoT teams as she provided them with most of the buffs they wanted: damage percentage, speed, and resistance reduction, even defense shred at E1. The combination between Huo, Kafka, Ruin Mei, and Black Swan at her release in 2.0 provided us with the first real premier DoT team, which had no problems clearing all of the content thrown at her. The team was also on the cheaper side of premier teams, as out of them only Black Swan really benefited from her signature, while the other three could have been equipped easily with a 4-star light cone. Now, in a quick succession also came the third edition, and the first major addition for both of them, and that was Acheron in 2.1, as Huo and Ruin Mei were released before Black Swan, which brought forward the now-known Docheron team, a team comprised of all three of them alongside a sustainer unit. This team is to this day the most used variant of the DoT archetype, as it has a great damage ceiling and amazing synergy between the units as all of them work off each other. At this point, we now have two different variants for the DoT archetype: the traditional DoT team comprised of Kafka, Black Swan, a support unit, and sustainer, and the Docheron team, which includes Kafka, Black Swan, acheron, and a sustainer. Both team variants have different strengths and weaknesses and can be used just as fine in all three of the major endgame modes. Now let's move over the timeline a bit further and see what additional changes both of them suffered. The traditional DoT variant received another alternative to the support slot in 2.2 in Robin, as she provided them with a damage buff, an attack buff, and the 100% action advance from her ultimate. If you were to compare the buffs between her and Ruin Mei, you would be down to preference and the stage you are tackling, as the performance between the two was fairly similar. The second and last addition for the traditional variant came just last patch with the introduction of Jiao, which could be slotted in as a replacement for Black Swan with Kafka, or he could be slotted in the place of the support for a triple DoT composition, as his own DoT would be detonated by Kafka and his Ashen damage amplification would have affected all of their DoT damage. But even more importantly, apart from himself, a nice addition to the variant was the release of his signature, as this one could have been easily used by Black Swan to further boost the team's overall damage. The second DoT variant, the Docheron, also had two additions for it. The first was the release of Aventurine in the same patch as Acheron, which is to this day the best sustainer for Acheron due to his crit damage debuff inflicted on the enemy. If you also have his signature or equip him with the 4-star trend light cone, he's a real stack generator for Acheron. While his addition mainly boosted Acheron herself, her damage contribution in the Docheron variant is quite substantial, so any buff to her damage is equal to a buff to team overall damage, and in conclusion, a net positive for our two DoT units present in the team as well. And the last addition was just like for the traditional variant. The release of Jiao and his light cone which slotted in the place of either Black Swan or Kafka, provided more damage amplification and stack generation for acheron. Although at this point, this variant mostly became an acheron team instead of an acheron DoT synergy as the team's DPS. And that is all in terms of team changes. In terms of builds, not much has changed in terms of relics, as both of them still want to use the DoT set. In terms of broken sets though, both of them received a decent two-piece option with the introduction of the Pioneer set, as the team has plenty of debuffs at its disposal. For planar sets, things are pretty much the same, Glamoth for Kafka and the IPC set for Black Swan. Although the recent addition of Lushaka can be used by the support slot of the team to buff one of them if you adjust your team positioning ahead of the fight. Lastly, for light cones, Kafka still has the same recommendations in either her signature or the 4-star Goodnight Light Cone, while Black Swan received a supportive alternative to her signature in Jiao's signature. Now, to also ask the final questions, how they held up in terms of the meta, and are they still worth going for? The first one I actually answered already if you paid attention to the background footage of this video, as I actually cleared both the final chamber of MOC in 4 cycles, and also the latest iteration of Apocalyptic Shadow with the maximum rewards fully on auto, this being without any buffs to the DoT damage of the team from the stages. And just so you are further impressed, for the second side of these runs, I used a Premier E2 Firefly break team which cleared the MOC in 4 cycles as well, and only got 40 additional points in Apocalyptic Shadow compared to the DoT team. So yeah, I can say without reservation that they are still relevant to the meta to this day, and they make quite a strong general core for all endgame modes. What they are missing to be truly great is a team member, preferably in the support slot, which will directly have a DoT damage buff. Think of Ruin Mei, but instead of being focused on break damage for a good portion of her kit, be focused on DoT damage. If this DoT damage buff comes from the sustain slot, that would also be amazing. An addition of a planner set focused on DoT damage amplification would also make a huge difference. So in conclusion, are they still worth going for? In my opinion, absolutely, as they make a great generalist core that has plenty of team variation, which will help you tackle any content out there, and since this archetype is the most neglected one we have currently, it can only improve in time with additional units. But let me know down in the comments, what are your thoughts on this objectively hot DoT duo? Are you still finding them great, or are you planning on getting them this patch? Do you think they will implement more DoT support in the future, or is this just a forgotten archetype? But until next time, I am Professor Veritas Ratio, and remember, stay smart and sexy.